Early on in my channel, I made a video called The Problem with Retro Motorcycles. That was one of the first videos to really take off for me, as it was obviously somewhat controversial and it's a bit of a trendy topic. It was also my first video to really get any sort of hate. Turns out riders get sensitive if you talk bad about their favorite motorcycles. Now, I've always wanted to make a part 2 to that video and explain a few things, as well as point out some stuff that I got wrong, but also take this topic further. And with the upcoming release and recent unveil of the new production BSA Gold Star, I figured that this was a really good time to do it. In my original video on this topic, I basically argued that retro motorcycles today, that is motorcycles that are harkening back to a specific style or even specific motorcycle model within a period, well, those motorcycles rarely stay true to the original spirit of the machines that they're copying, with the exception of a few motorcycles, for example, like the Triumph Speed Twin and the Kawasaki Z900 RS, but the Triumph Bonneville line and the Kawasaki W1 and Royal Enfield Interceptor, these are all pointing back to motorcycles that were performance bikes. These were the fastest, most powerful motorcycles that you could buy, and they were legendary for that reason. They were also beautiful and timelessly styled, which in many ways is really the point. But most of that is lost when a brand either brings back an old legendary model, or in the case of BSA with their new model, basically hijacking that legendary name altogether. And that's essentially my problem. It all comes across as rather disingenuous and hypocritical, especially when brands try to talk about these motorcycles as being so authentic and timeless and pointing to the heritage, when in cases like this, they're essentially just buying the name and trying to get sales, and really just sort of jump on a trend. Now, the biggest error I think I made in that video was going as far as to claim that some of these original motorcycles would actually beat their copies when it comes to performance, when in reality, though the power to weight ratio is much better on many of the originals, especially bikes like the Royal Enfield Interceptor, modern motorcycles, even modern motorcycles using cheap tech like many of the retro bikes, with all of the advancements in frame design and suspension and braking, yeah, there's really no chance that these old bikes could hang with the new bikes, even though these new ones are not performance motorcycles. I mean, even though I do say that, I still think it would be fascinating to see if a new stock Interceptor or stock Bonneville 900 would be able to hang with the original stock Interceptor or Bonneville. But that's not really all that important. What you can't deny is that the spirit of performance is all but gone with most retro bikes. That's not to say that a modern T100 isn't a good bike, it's just really nothing like the original Triumphs that it's copying, and I can say that because I have ridden both and I do own and ride an original Triumph. These old bikes are high revving, incredibly lightweight, nimble sport bikes for their time. The original T100, for example, or Daytona as it was named, was a Daytona winning motorcycle. This was one of the fastest motorcycles in the world. It really was a sort of super sport of its time. And that 900cc platform, yeah, it's not winning anything. Trust me. Now, I make all sorts of other arguments in that video, so you can check it out if for some reason you're enjoying this line of thinking. But there's more to it than that for me than just, the performance aspect, as I personally don't care for modern sport bikes, and I actually really enjoyed riding a Triumph Modern Classic. I mean, it's essentially a high torque, low power cruiser, and let's be real, torque is always going to be more fun than horsepower. But more on this in a bit. For now, let's talk about the new Gold Star specifically. Now, the new BSA Gold Star is a 650cc liquid-cooled, but, fake air-cooled, single-cylinder retro motorcycle. So this is a very big single. 45 horsepower, 55 newton meters of torque, which is a little over 40 foot-pounds, 469 pounds wet, budget brakes, budget suspension. Yeah, nothing too crazy here. It's a heavy retro bike that doesn't produce a lot of power, just like most of the other retro bikes. Now, in comparison, the original Gold Star was a 500cc single from the late 50s, and it made about 40 horsepower. It also weighed around 400 pounds wet and utilized the best available braking, suspension. So, as with other retro bikes, this one isn't far off in terms of power to weight to the new example, but of course, the original Gold Star is going to feel quite a bit lighter because it is quite a bit lighter. Probably the most comparable big single that you could get to the new Gold Star in terms of size would be a Duke 690, but I don't want to embarrass anyone with the specs on a KTM Duke 690 compared to this bike. The most obvious comparison is the Interceptor, which in terms of specs is quite similar, though obviously it's a twin. But when it comes to looks, for many riders, the Interceptor nails the classic look better than any other bike out there, even the Triumphs. And the key is proportions. Old British bikes were slim and sleek, they were stripped down, there was no sort of excess. And they had these intentional, subtle, but beautiful designs. The original Gold Star is the epitome of what motorcycles cannot be today. The tank is small. Sure, that's not ideal for long trips, but in terms of overall look, it looks fantastic. And then we have the new Gold Star, which, I'm sorry, it looks just like a cheap, uninspiring, unoriginal copy of that original bike because it's impossible to make a modern bike that slim and that sleek. Classic British bikes have these wonderful exposed engines, slim sweeping exhaust, whether it's a classic Triumph or Norton or BSA. This exhaust is a cheap attempt at capturing the look of that iconic original single exhaust from the Gold Star, but it's 2022 and with emissions regulations, it's simply impossible to do anything remotely close to what that original bike is doing. It's liquid cooled, so of course there's a giant radiator still smacked right there on the front and just totally out of place. The simple look of the original Gold Star's cockpit is gone. It doesn't look like a Gold Star from that area. The seat looks nothing like the original. And then how can we have a Gold Star that doesn't at least come with an optional clip-on setup? This was the cafe racer's dream motorcycle, and everyone wanted it in Clubman's trim with that low handlebar setup as well as the, rear sets. In the end, for me, it's just unoriginal and uninspiring. There's some things in terms of design that they did do pretty well. It is a pretty good looking liquid cooled engine, for trying to look air cooled. It does look air cooled. But in the end, it kind of just looks like a watered down milquetoast cheap copy of that original iconic, beautiful, and really different design. It basically looks like the Interceptor's ugly sibling. Now, I'm not saying that it's the worst looking motorcycle that you could buy. It does have a sort of classic-ish look to it. I mean, I would definitely turn my head if I saw one floating around where I live, but I can tell you this, I'll turn my head a lot faster if I see a classic Gold Star puttering around. Now, I have not ridden the new Gold Star, and I doubt I'll ever get a chance to unless I buy one. And I've ridden classic British bikes, but I have never ridden an original Gold Star, as they're incredibly rare and just not easy to get your hands on. I did have a friend who has ridden one talk to me not too long ago about his experience riding the original Gold Star, and he was very honest with me about it. I mean, I think the simplest way to put it is that this was not a beginner bike by any stretch of the imagination. These are the kinds of bikes that you have to master, and it doesn't just come quick. When they're set up properly, they don't idle, for example, and then you're tucked into that race position. They're difficult to start, difficult to use. A Gold Star was, in its day, the perfect track or road racing bike. And let's just say the new Gold Star could not be further from that. And that's okay in and of itself. We do need approachable motorcycles. It just makes it tough to see how this is some sort of bike that's in line with the original Gold Star, other than a few design cues and the fact that it's a big single. And it's not just performance, it's also character. The original Gold Star, like so many other British bikes from its time, had all sorts of great little quirks and sometimes foibles, from the vibe to the sound. The original Gold Star has this iconic big single exhaust note with a distinctive sort of twitter, and all of this appears to be lost with the new Gold Star. The sound just is not there. Even KTM's big singles sound so much better. For me, the overall intent behind a new motorcycle project is really important, and keen potential customers can usually see through all of the marketing BS to what a manufacturer is really trying to do. When we look back at great motorcycles through history, whether it's something like a Suzuki Hayabusa or Yamaha R1 or a Gixxer or a Ducati 916, even the original Gold Star or, a Bonneville, it's easy to see why these motorcycles were massively successful and why they have had long runs. They were exceptional motorcycles that maybe weren't originally intended for mass market success or for huge profits, but over time they had incredible sales because they truly were some of the best motorcycles in the world. These are motorcycles that were born out of passion, not just a desire to make money. Now, I've made an entire video covering the history of BSA's Gold Star, but the gist of it is this. The Gold Star was born out of rather unexpected racing success from a company in BSA who really was not known for making performance bikes at this time. But with the Gold Star, there was this desire to build a motorcycle that stood out using the highest quality materials and making incredible bikes for racing in any category, whether it's endurance or road racing or off-road. And in the end, the Gold Star became an icon. It became a bike for people who were rebellious, who wanted to go fast, and the ultimate machine for the legendary ton-up boys and cafe racers in Great Britain. Not a bike for the faint of heart. Incredibly difficult to master from starting it to riding it. It was the epitome of cool in Great Britain in the 50s and 60s to own a big British single, and the coolest big British single was the BSA Gold Star. And then BSA dies along with every other British motorcycle manufacturer, and the Gold Star dies with it. An icon left to the annals of history alongside other great British motorcycle brands like Brough Superior or Vincent or, even Triumph with the Bonneville. And not just motorcycle manufacturers, even great British car manufacturers like Austin Healey. But then came the era of looking back that we live in today, from style and fashion to vinyls to car and motorcycle design. And this was all perfectly timed with the rebirth of the Triumph Bonneville and, the entire hipster movement. But basically, old is cool. But, not actually old. We want things that look old but still provide all the benefits of the new. But for me, sort of hijacking the BSA name, and then of course the Gold Star name, is the epitome of what I hate about the retro bike craze. See, Royal Enfield has its roots in British motorcycle history and sort of the legend that it was pre-war, but that company really did establish itself as sort of the Harley-Davidson of India. It's just as much an Indian company as it is a British company. So when Royal Enfield pulls a name out of their history but does it in their own special way, it comes off as more genuine, BSA and the Gold Star name have no roots anywhere but Great Britain. So it's really hard for me to get excited when a large, conglomerate that isn't British comes in and buys the name and tries to sort of reignite some sort of excitement about a long dead legendary British company. It'd be like Harley dying and then in 50 years being bought by a non-American company, and it really is at that level. Imagine Harley died today, and then 50 years from now, a company came along with a new model, the Sportster. And it kind of looked like a Sportster, but it wasn't really a Sportster. I don't know, it's just, ugh. I think it's easy to disconnect ourselves from the past because many of us didn't live in it. My generation will never get to smell or hear or feel what it was like in the 50s and 60s in America or Great Britain as these great machines, whether car or motorcycle, flew down the road. That was the world where the real Gold Star lived, and I feel like it just needs to be left there. To me, this encapsulates everything I hate about retro motorcycles today. This fake nod towards history and heritage, cheap copying of iconic styles, and a total lack of interest in the original spirit behind the bike. Now, don't get me wrong, it is difficult to make a retro motorcycle today. I mean, it might even be considered impossible to truly make the kind of bike that I guess I want. See, with modern performance comes all sorts of things that clutter up the bike. Disc brakes will never look as good as those old drum brakes. Obviously, no modern motorcycle is going to use drum brakes, but a drum brake just looks so much better. And then, of course, you have, brake reservoirs and digital clocks, making the cockpit lose its retro feel, extra electronics that really bulk up the overall look, obviously bigger gas tanks. I mean, I'm like impossible to please because I don't know really what I'm asking for. I just don't like what I'm seeing. It's difficult for me to envision the new Gold Star having the kind of success that the Interceptor has had, as it's starting out at 6,500 pounds or just over $7,100 US, while the Interceptor starts at 6K US. I guess a fraction of Royal Enfield's success would be a success, but it's hard to see how this bike is going to inspire a lot of people interested in retro bikes, and I feel like the whole retro bike thing, I don't know, it could be on its way out. Now, compare this new BSA with Norton Commando's 961 that they recently unveiled. Sure, it has many of the same problems, but it's not supposed to be as much of a copy in terms of design of the original bike. It's more of an interpretation, so to speak, of the original Commando design with a sort of sport bike aesthetic. And there's really nice nods toward that Commando with the tilted engine and overall engine design, upswept exhaust, and the header form, and of course, color options. But beyond that, there's little that is making the new Commando a retro bike. And though it's not necessarily the kind of bike that I would like to ride and own, I can respect the overall project for having some sort of hand-built look and feel and for the creativity behind it. There really is something special about what Norton is doing after all they've been through. In the end, though, this is really just my opinion, and of course, I'm trying to make an argument, but I'm completely open to hearing your opinions, and that's why we have comments here on YouTube. So let me know what you think about this. Maybe you ride a retro bike and have more to add to the discussion, or maybe you're really excited about the upcoming Gold Star and you're going to buy one. Don't be afraid to voice your opinion down below, and I'll try to spend some time sort of pinning the best comments. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. As always, ride safe.